My name is Dr. Paul Martin, and I am the President and Professor of Pastoral Theology at the American Baptist Seminary of the West in Berkeley, California.
Dr. Martin, share your experience thus far immersed in this Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference.
Well, let me start off by saying that Dr. Proctor in 1959 was my homiletics teacher at the Samuel Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union, and mesmerized by his desire and his love for those of us who were students preparing for ministry. And that was like a kickstart for me in terms of my ministry, having come from the West Coast to the East Coast and participating with Dr. Proctor in that event. So it is wonderful to see how the Proctor Conference has grown in the last 10 years. I was involved with the third year of the Proctor Conference, and then greatly involved personally with the Katrina adoption program that you had. So I've been around for a while, although I've not been to all of the Proctor conferences because of my job responsibility. But now that I'm president of the American Baptist Seminary of the West, I see how important it is to nurture the next generation of clergy leadership, pastoral leadership, ministerial leadership. So I am so happy to see so many, as they stood up last night, so many seminarians now engaged in this process, because we are concerned about the quality of leadership for the African American congregations and churches for the future. Our mission statement at the seminary is that we are indeed preparing men and women for ministry in the 21st century. And this is a part of how that journey shapes itself. So I am just thoroughly excited about not only this year, but possibly in the coming years, a West Coast Proctor Conference. Hopefully we can pray and get that in shape. It would be wonderful.
I think that would be a very, very important thing for us to do in our path moving forward, to build that in.
Go West, Proctor.
Go West, Proctor. How are you viewing and seeing the challenges and the opportunities for seminary education?
To answer you specifically on the future, the record is indicating, and all of the evidence is that seminary education is declining, and that bothers me as a pastor for over 50 years, and then as a seminary graduate myself, to realize that the connections between the local church and the academy is weakening. And we're concerned about strengthening those ties, because it is the local church that we're preparing men and women to serve in. Primarily, we know that there are a lot of vocational interests for ministers now outside of the church, but we see the focus. And as we review all the statistics and all of the problems that theological education is undergoing now, we're concerned that the traditional Afrocentric educational process, which is the lifeline for the African American church, must be maintained. And I see the Proctor Conference, more than any other conference that I've seen over the years, focusing its attention on, in a deliberate way, on the maintenance of that tie that binds. Last night, for instance,
No, go ahead. No, speak to that.
As we left the hotel and went to Friendship West, the feeling in that sanctuary and the gathering and the motivation that occurred as we witnessed the music and the celebratory experience was just regenerative in terms of the spirit. And see, that's what happens. And we as African American people know the centrality of the church. And that's in every denomination. It's not just Baptist or Methodist, but it's across the. When we come together,
We do church.
Oh, we do church.
We know how to do church.
And the Proctor conference has to be applauded for that. And I know that they said this was one of the few times that you left the hotel.
It was the only time.
Is that right?
It was the first and only,
okay.
yes.
Well, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Quite often, as often as you can,
yeah.
you know. And the pastor was just exhilarated, you know. He was so excited.
Dr. Haynes has been excited for a year.
He
for
was
us to
so
come to
excited,
Texas.
you know. And that's where our celebration is,
sure.
you know. I know that we in the academy that we are struggling with things like the loss of revenue. You know, at our seminary we have to develop new streams of financing the seminary. But the bottom line is the joy of celebrating the life of Christ in the context of the academy and the church as a co-partner.
One of the ways we're looking to help self-sustain and be a better partner is to think about the archive of the richness that over the last 10 years we've collected.
Absolutely.
And so we are now engaged in repurposing a lot of the video that we have with a vision that it can become resources for either online instruction or additional library resources that students can, you know, have access to. Do you think that's a viable idea?
Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
a worthwhile one that seminaries would be willing to put some money into, just in terms of as they would a library budget?
Send me a letter and
let you be the pilot.
Let me be the pilot.
All right. Okay. I love it.
And the reason I say that is because Jeremiah Wright, who you know, is just my buddy. I brought him to a ministry that I was pastor of, a Presbyterian church in Los Angeles in the 80s. And he did probably 3 or 4 revivals for us. And one of the revival weeks, we were doing 5-night revivals at that time. And one of the revival weeks, one of the seminaries in the area heard that he was coming, and they came to me and they said, can we video his preaching to put in our archives to use for our homiletics class? And they came in and did each night. And I still have those of a young Jeremiah Wright preaching.
Isn't that amazing?
You know, yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. If you archive that, I'm sure that we can use that, you know, and provide that as educational material for our seminary work. Yes, that would be great.
Well, that's what we're working on now.
Yeah.
We're trying to create a model, a template, using the Moodle platform, which is the platform that many seminaries have adopted.
Right, yeah, we use it at our seminary.
Okay,
yeah,
very good.
So
well,
we use
that's
it for
encouraging.
For our online presentation, right, yeah.
Speak to us a little bit about the challenges of women in ministry who finish seminary and then have the challenge of finding a call or a pulpit.
I kind of laugh at that because we are struggling. We have graduated many women in our MDiv program and also in our DMin program at the seminary, and they are floundering out there in the sea of despair.
Wow.
Because there are no, even the denominational related women who want to achieve ministry in the context of their denomination are not being placed. So we are concerned about not only preparing men and women, especially women, because you know the majority of the population of our seminaries now are women.
Are women, sure.
So what we're trying to do from where I serve is not only prepare them, but also to open up the way for them to be placed. And we're trying to deal with that in terms of denominational structures, because we do Methodist. We have Methodist students, not United, AME Zion, CME, Baptist. So we're mounting a campaign to get them into the mainstream of placement. If we become a placement agent, that's what we're looking at in terms of...
And some of that resistance, quite honestly, is from the laity. Is that not true too?
And the women.
And the women, laity more specifically.
Yes, absolutely. That's a story that we hear coming, you know, which is quite interesting.
Right, and a sad tale.
Yeah, it is a sad tale.
So it's a call to the womanist theologians
Right.
to begin to think about what we need
right.
to do.
And here again is the significance of the church being engaged in the process of sharing their resources with the educational system, with the academy.
Right.
You know, if a church raises a preacher or a pastor and sends them off to seminary and promises them a place to minister when they come out of seminary, as I was promised when I came up, you know, because when I was in seminary, there weren't any women in seminary. You know, they just never heard of that.
Exactly.
Didn't see any women in pastoral leadership. But this is a different day. And so the seminary has a responsibility in three areas. First of all, to protect the student from overindulging in loans.
Yes.
That they're going to have to pay back.
So they don't have to
6
hijack
months
their
after.
future.
That's right.
Right.
And I'm talking about students going through 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of seminary education, coming out with
$70,000, $80,000, $100,000.
$100,000.
Right, right.
You know, and then secondly, to educate them, you know, to provide the educational atmosphere in preparation for ministry, and third, to make sure that they have a place to minister. I think that's the extension of what we're called to do now in seminary education. Okay. Yeah, so, and that's a political reality.
The last reflection I would like to ask you to share with us has to do with your thoughts about the memories of Alan Bozak and the times you all shared historically, and to give us a context and a background.
I can't speak too much to it because I was not at the seminary. I was not employed by the seminary. I was a pastor of a church that gave funds to support his ministry at the seminary. Dr. Keith Russell, who was with New York Theological Seminary, was the president at that time, and he reached out to several of us who had larger churches to make contributions. So we invited Dr. Bozak to Denver, Colorado, in the Macedonia Baptist Church, and hosted him over a weekend. And he did a banquet for us, magnificent, like he's done here, you know, magnificent. And this was previous to the time that he had to go back to South Africa to stand trial, you know, for the apartheid situation. So we were fortunate to have him come. He excited the community there in Denver. They had never seen a freedom fighter of that hue, you know, and especially from South Africa. So, and he preached for us on that Sunday. He and his lovely wife were with us that entire weekend, and we just fell in love with him. And he carried back a big check from our experience to help him, you know, at his stake. I sure would love to have him come back now that I'm there. You know.
Well, I'm sure he will, because he's here for a while.
I'm going to talk to him and see if we can't get him back on campus. He's been to Oakland. He celebrated in one of the churches, but we want him back on campus to do something maybe during the summer for an intensive.
That'd be great.
Yes, he's a wonderful presence. And Proctor,
so powerful.
Proctor,
he exegites a text like no one else.
Unbelievable. He talked about those wounds last night.
You want to go get some movies.
Yeah, he made a lot of sense.
He sure did.
He made a lot of sense. Let me commend you for this year's conference. You've had some magnificent speakers. Gail was wonderful.
Wasn't Gail wonderful?
Oh, just kind of blows your mind to see what's out there. And Walter, the Thomas gentleman, the Thomas guy, oh, he was absolutely incredible this morning, you know. So I'm just glad to be a part, and we'll be in next year.
All right, glad to have you.